Look, testosterone cypionate is the most widely available TRT ester pretty much on the planet, man. I don't think you can find a country where cypionate isn't like the first thing prescribed. And yes, a lot of people have problems with it, but some people swear by it. I wrote and filmed an entire video course explaining protocols to dial in specifically sexual function on testosterone cypionate, so it is possible. Let's break this down, right? It's supposed to have a 7-day half-life. So within a 7-day period, you have most of the testosterone that you injected in the blood. Now, cypionate starts peaking at day 2 or 3 or so, but then it starts troughing down. So at like day 3, day 4, you might have 75% of the cypionate left. And then again, at day 7 or 8, depending on how your body's responding to the half-life, you have 50% of that cypionate left. But that trough, the trough on the remaining days, like days 3.5 through 7, is sometimes perfect to keep estrogen in range. Again, you're troughing. You don't have aromatizable androgen at full capacity at that point. It's reducing to 75% to 60%, then at day 7 to 50%. Thus, the estradiol is going down. And in those cases for the, I would say, not super rare, but kind of rare, lucky few, they dial in perfectly. But keeping cypionate hovering right around the zone, that can be the tricky thing. So what I want to do in this video is I want to break down the best doses, the best frequency. We're going to break down doses with aromatase inhibitors, without aromatase inhibitors. I'm going to give you the master failsafe protocol on cypionate. If you can't dial in on any other strategy, just use this. And we're going to talk about some hybrids. So sit back, strap in, grab a beer. Let's break down the testosterone cypionate protocols for TRT that actually work. All right, before we start the video, look, Cortex Labs, which is my company, is a TRT guidance and sexual dysfunction resolution company. Got a range of different products relative to that. Number one, coaching. I am a coach on TRT, and what I predominantly do is fix libido and erection issues on androgens, on TRT, on HRT. You can hire me for any of the packages that are available at livecortex.com in under a minute. We're on the fact-finding call as soon as the next day. Right now, 30% off 3 and 6 month coaching. Source list. Yeah, listen, sometimes you need to circumvent the clinic and get any anabolic you can think of, including DHT, test of any ester, ancillaries. Just get source list. It's 20% off. Codes on the screen and down the description of this video. Lastly, if you want to dial in on cream, get Mastering Testosterone Cream. It's a video course targeting libido and erections, only the protocols that work. If you need to dial in on cypionate, I created a course for that. It's called Mastering Testosterone Cypionate. All 20% off down the description of this video. All of our products are down below, so you can get them, buy them, livecortex.com. All right, so let's get straight into the protocols that work. I want to make a note that most, if not all, protocols on any testosterone ester should include 20 milligrams of DHEA per day. Now, there's a caveat with that in that it could make you aromatize out of your zone. So if it does on any of these protocols, reduce it to 10 milligrams a day. And if you're still over aromatizing, reduce it to nothing. Okay, you don't absolutely positively need DHEA, but it is useful for converting testosterone into DHT in the penis and to make necessary libido-based neurosteroids. All right, so look, let's start with the lowest hanging fruit. This is the first protocol. And frankly, if you don't want to overcomplicate things, like this is where a lot of folks dial in on testosterone cypionate. It is the following: 70 milligrams injected intramuscularly, preferably upper glute with a 1-inch or more needle, every 3.5 or 4 days. 100 IU HCG daily, all right? That's the minimum effective dose for HCG. Now, depending on whether or not it's going to be every 3.5 days or every 4 days is really going to depend on where your estradiol is, both at peak and trough. So at day 3 and at day 6 or so. If you can hover in the 20 to 35 picograms per milliliter range within both of those time frames, then you're good and should be dialed in. Now, caveat, this will only work if you are an average aromatizer, okay? It is likely not going to work if you are an over-aromatizer. So if you're one of those people that no matter what on test, like you just need an AI, or you're aromatizing to 55 on doses where other people would aromatize to like 25, this is probably not going to work for you. But for average aromatizers, where thyroid function's good, you're metabolizing estradiol correctly, this should keep you in the range. This is, in fact, one of the cypionate protocols. I really don't like cypionate, right? But if I'm going to run it, that's what I've run. And that works really good for me for sexual function. My energy toward the latter end of the injection period of every 3.5 days is not super great, but it's passable. But, you know, the libido, the erections, the climax, the sensation, all that's pretty much perfect on that protocol for me personally. But I've repeated this at least 50 times with clients. The reason this works, I'm going to take us to steroid plotter for a second. Okay, so the reason that this works is because you're essentially executing one of the rules of TRT, which is if you don't want to use an aromatase inhibitor, you kind of have to hover between 700 and 800. Again, if you're an average aromatizer, nanograms per deciliter total testosterone. Where you end up peaking on this is about 833 nanograms per deciliter, call it. You trough back down to 700. Was that 790 nanograms per deciliter? It's a perfect range. You're not steady state, okay? We really don't want to be consistently steady state, otherwise overstimulation, sleep problems, and overaccumulation of estradiol happens. But if you can drop 50 nanograms per deciliter in between those 3.5 days, you inject on a Monday, then you inject again on a Thursday, and at the trough, you're dropping 50 to 60 nanograms per deciliter. It's just enough to keep estrogen in the sweet spot, not let it overaccumulate, and therefore keep your sexual function intact. All right, so that's every 3.5 days. Let's just switch this to every 4th day so you can get a gauge for what that looks like, and we'll plot that out. Okay, so here's every 4th day. Now, you're going to see the peak and troughs are a little bit lower, and for folks that are aromatizing a little too much, this might be useful for you, right? You peak over here at, what's the total peak? It looks like 729, 730. You're troughing down at 700, so it's a 30 or so nanogram per deciliter difference. But ultimately, you hover kind of on the lower band. Listen, if your physiology is working in terms of estrogen metabolism, specifically clearing it out of your body and not letting it accumulate, then at 700, between 700 and 730 total testosterone, you should be in the zone with estradiol and therefore sexual function intact. So every 3.5 days, every 4 days, it's going to depend on where the estrogen goes, both at peak and at trough. And yes, you should test both. Boys, you want to be on point with this stuff. You start moving it out to like every 5th day or something. Let's plot that. And then, you're sitting at 500, 590 is your peak, and your trough is like 560. Like, that's lukewarm. You might as well not be on TRT. It's like above 600, 650, 700. You're totally getting the benefits of TRT, the anabolism, the energy, the confidence, the masculinity. You're not going to have enough DHT to lose hair. You're in the great zone for estradiol. You go down to every 5th day on a 70 milligram injection, and then you're looking at, natty territory right here. 590, 560. It's not TRT at that point. All right, so that's protocol number 1. It aims to not complicate your protocol, as in not bringing an AI in, and then just naturally doing it so that throughout the week you have enough testosterone to sustain your energy, but you don't over-aroma. Now, what this assumes, though, is that you end up in the sweet spot in terms of the numbers, essentially the golden rule of TRT, high enough DHT, E2 between 20 and 35 picograms per milliliter. This is the perfect case scenario that this graphic illustrates, okay? 70 milligrams, twice a week injection, the E2 lands in range, and DHT is 60 or above. Now, some folks can get by with 55 DHT or above, but that's kind of the line, and below which you start having erectile difficulty, or at least they're not as strong. All right, so have a look at that graphic. If you're going to execute that protocol, these should be your target numbers right here. That is going to be a state in which you're dialed in terms of both energy and sexual function. Second protocol. Now we're going to talk about higher dose cypionate with an AI. Second protocol is 200 milligrams of SIP, 1x weekly, every 7 days, 200 milligram injection in the upper glute, preferably with a 1 inch or 1.5 inch needle. Again, you don't want to be injecting large boluses of testosterone with a 1/2 inch insulin syringe, okay? Most of it's going to go sub-Q, or you're going to get like the base level of the muscle. It's not going deep enough into the vascular tissue for it to metabolize correctly. 0.125 or 0.25 milligrams Arimidex the day after you inject. And then your baseline of 100 IU of HCG every day. Now, what these protocols do, if you're one of those who can tolerate a protocol like that, and plenty of people do, they're dialed in on a 1 injection a week and a little bit of Arimidex the next day, estrogen falls in range, they have enough DHT, they ride off into the sunset. Is at day 3 here, you're going to get a pretty substantial peak in testosterone. You're going to be between 1,200 and 1,700 nanograms per deciliter. That's substantially high. But with 0.125 milligrams in anastrozole or 0.25 milligrams in anastrozole, you're preventing on the day 2 of taking that after the injection the estrogen from continuing to climb. You know, people always have this sort of perplexing question about this situation. Do you use your aromatase inhibitor on the day of injection or the day after injection? I always suggest the day after the injection, so that some estradiol can convert and accumulate so that you run a lot less of a risk of taking the E22 down or crashing it with the AI. Now, in these states, when these protocols work, this is like, besides cream and like good hybrid protocols, this is the most dialed in I've ever seen anyone, right? A bolus of cypionate, they're anabolic as hell, they feel fucking great, they look great, they're masculine, they have energy, but the estrogen is controlled really, really tightly, all right? They stay 25, 27, 32, 35, right in that range with functional testicles, and they're dialed in. Is a protocol like this going to be everybody? Absolutely not. There are some people that are just going to make way too much acne, right? All this sebaceous gland sebum production, and your whole back is going to be filled with acne. Are some people very sensitive to the use of aromatase inhibitors? Abso-fucking-lutely. And in those cases, protocols like this just do not work, right? It's an uneven distribution of estrogen at the tissues. Your tissues feel like you are estrogen deficient because the aromatase inhibitor is working too powerfully, too strongly. It's not adhering to the half-life and the reduction of estradiol that the studies purport it's supposed to, and your body just responds in a haywire fashion to it. That happens. In those cases, you've got to go down. You got to either try the first protocol that I had you think about, or you've got to ultimately go down on dose. So let's talk about the third protocol and what to do next if all this stuff fails. Third protocol is 60 milligrams. 60 milligrams injected intramuscularly in the upper glute, at least with a 1 inch needle, preferably 1.5 inch needle. You want to get it all the way in the vascular tissue of the muscle every 3.5 days, right? So it's just 120 a week, but you're 60 milligrams every 3.5 days. Again, your baseline minimum effective dose of 100 IU of HCG and then 20 milligrams DHEA a day. Again, keep the DHEA in there unless you're over aromatizing, at which point bring it down to 10 milligrams. If you're still over aromatizing, remove it completely. I know, let's plot this out, okay? We're plotting 60 milligrams every 3.5 days of testosterone cypionate on steroid plotter, which again, may not be 100% accurate, but largely this is an accurate website for how we metabolize testosterone. You got a peak over here at 17, it looks like, is the highest you go. 17, you got a trough at 679. 679 is the trough. That's great. Again, you are not consistently steady state. You do have a trough. Estrogen doesn't continue to accumulate. And you're around the sweet spot in terms of total testosterone, right? High 6s, low-ish or mid-700s. Again, unless you are an over-aromatizer, the E2 is going to be in check with this protocol. You wouldn't want to push this to every fourth day because let's plot that out again. You get into natty territory there. Yeah, look, I mean, you're troughing down here. You're kind of lukewarm. Okay, you're troughing at 600. You're peaking at 623 right there. So honestly, every fourth day, if you absolutely have to, if you're over aromatizing, maybe do that, and you should be okay. But you're on the borderline. I mean, look at these numbers. You're absolutely on the borderline of being a natty at that point. You're still going to have more steady state than a natty, so the androgen receptor activation will be more significant, and thus you'll have more anabolism. But I mean, unless you have to do this, I wouldn't suggest doing it. You know, if you have to do this, you're probably better with test cream. So that's the third protocol. I think a lot of folks that are having problems with the higher doses or with an AI are going to find a great sweet spot there, assuming, again, that you respond to cypionate correctly and that by day 3.5, you're not feeling like you're hypogonadal because the testosterone has dropped too much. But if you can't make those doses work, let's talk about the fourth option, which is the testosterone cypionate Failsafe protocol. The Failsafe gives you the minimum effective dose of testosterone so that specifically you can get estradiol in range and hopefully you squeak by with enough dihydrotestosterone, 55 nanograms per deciliter or above, and that is 98 milligrams a week. You're doing daily injections of 14 milligrams a day. Use at least a 5/8 inch needle and put it in the upper glute. Because you don't want to be pinned. I mean, unless you want to pin a harpoon every day. I mean, I don't want to do that. I don't suggest people do that. You can get it in the muscle with the 5/8 inch needles, insulin syringes, but not the half insulin syringes. And then your baseline of 100 IU of HCG daily. Now, you've got to apply a specific set of logic to adjust this or determine if this is right for you, and it is the following. If E2 is in range, in the sex-friendly zone of 20 to 35 picograms per milliliter, and you have good sexual function, erections at night, erections for sex, sensation, libido, you're good. You found your dose and you're dialed in. But what sometimes happens, as I alluded to with DHT squeaking by, is you don't have enough DHT on this. The estrogen is 27, but the DHT is 50, 45, 40. It's just a little too low if you want the really, really hard, sustainable, rigid erection quality. So for some people, that's it. That's protocol 4. You ride off in the sunset, you're good, you're dialed in. But if you don't have enough DHT and sexual function is still not great, if E2 is in range, you simply need a little bit of DHT, a little bit more DHT. And I wouldn't suggest getting the transdermal stuff at this point, although you could, 1 milligram on the scrotum every other day or so. But what I would do sooner is execute a hybrid protocol of adding 100 milligram per milliliter cream, where each click is 25 milligrams, and do 1 click on the scrotum every day or every other day. That will bump the E2 up maybe 5 points, a negligible effect right there, but it's going to give you enough DHT if you're applying the cream to the scrotum to balance this all out. Now you've got estrogen in range and you've got 65 nanograms per deciliter DHT. That's the golden rule. Functional testicles, estrogen in range, high enough DHT. So to simplify Cypionate, those are the protocols that work. And if you execute all of them and you're not exactly dialed in, I can guarantee you you're close on every single one of them. Only make small adjustments to the test, the HEG, the DHEA, the cream or whatever, if you're not able to dial in completely on those protocols. Listen, Cypionate, is it the best? No, I mean, it keeps you really steady state. People tend to have hematocrit problems on test Cypionate. All the overstimulation, sleeplessness, insomnia, all that kind of shit, acne tends to come the most on testosterone Cypionate. But for a contingent of people, a percentage of people that use testosterone, Cypionate is just going to work better, right? It's just going to work better for them. I hate to admit that because I hate the ester, honestly. I'll probably never use it again, at least like as a base TRT. In these cases, with these protocols or protocols that look very similar to those protocols, that's where testosterone Cypionate shines. All right, I broke down a bunch more protocols in mastering testosterone Cypionate using not just aromatase inhibitors, but DHT derivatives like Masteron and Primabond. You can get that course livecortex.com. It's a video course. You can download it and watch it instantly. It's 20% off. Code is on the screen. If you need to dial in on test cream, or you want to switch to cream from Cypionate or Enanthate, you've got to get this course. I mean, it shows you exactly the steps to take to dial in the libido and erections on test cream, and also dispels a lot of the myths. If you follow the crap on the internet, you're going to be dosing 200 milligram cream twice a day. Your test is going to be at 1150, 1200, 1700. E2 is going to be at 55 or 60, and you will have ED. I broke down how to use cream for sexual function in this course. It's 20% off, livecortex.com. Code's on the screen. Last thing, if you want to just not go at it alone, just hire me. I mean, what I do and have been doing for more than a half decade is take people that are on skewed TRT protocols, specifically where libido, erection, sensation, and climax are bad, and dial them in permanently. You want a protocol that you can just set it and leave it and you're done. You don't want to have to continue to do the dance of dialing in. That is what we do. Right now, if you want to book me for a 3-month or 6-month package, you can do so at a 30% discount. That is a significant price reduction. The code is 30 now and on the screen. You can book me in under a minute at livecortex.com, and I am calling you within a day or two, and we start. Look, if you're spinning your wheels and you're having sexual dysfunction on TRT, just bring me on board. This is what I do. This is what I love to do. We get results, and we will resolve the problem. All right, boys, it has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Please like the video. It makes a huge difference. The snowstorm, among other things, it made it so I couldn't create a lot of content in January, so we're trying to kind of tell the algorithm we're back. So please like the video, comment, share it, sub to the channel. If you're new here, I'd love to have you on board. Much more content coming and a lot of content already posted. Otherwise, boys, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.